All right, I think we're ready to go.
Sorry.
Hello, everybody. Woohoo! My name is Peter Drake. I'm the provost at the New York Academy of Art. I want to welcome you all to our fall professional practice lecture series put together by the inimitable Dexter Wimberly. Dexter has been a senior critic here at the Academy since 2019. This is also the first time in 4 years that we're doing this in person, so this is like Christmas morning for us. He is the founder and director of Hayama Artist Residency in Japan. He's also the co-founder and CEO of online education platform CreativeStudy. He's an American curator based in Japan who's organized exhibitions in galleries and institutions around the world, including the Museum of Arts and Design in New York City, the Museum of African Diaspora in San Francisco, the Green Family Foundation in Dallas, an amazing place, by the way, the Harvey B. Gantt Center in Charlotte, KOKI Arts in Tokyo, BODE in Berlin, and the Third Line in Dubai. His exhibitions have been reviewed and featured in publications including the New York Times and Artforum, and has received support from the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts and the Kinkade Family Foundation. Please welcome Dexter and his guests.
Thank you. Whoa, that's loud. Peter, thank you so much for that. I really do appreciate it. To be in this room with all of you is really important to me, and it has been 4 years, which is like startling in a way. And I just really appreciate the generosity of all of our panelists here. This is like really intimate. I feel like we should have like wind instruments, like you're playing the flute, and you're on the oboe, and you're in like, like the piccolo.
You better choose your words carefully.
Shout chime.
Rasu's on the sax.
There you go.
But thank you all for taking time out of your very, very busy days to join us. Now, here's something that's interesting about tonight that is not reflective of the past, I would say, 3, maybe 4 years of our lives. Not recorded, not live streamed. I don't know what's going on there, but it is not live streamed. and I'm saying that because...
So the archives.
It's for the archives.
Yes.
Because this is going to be the first time I've had a live conversation with curators and other individuals in the arts in 4 years. So I'm really, really honored to be here. And so we're going to just like jump right into it. And I'm going to read an abbreviated version of each person's bio so that they can then fill in the blanks. Sitting to my left is Alexis Lowry. Alexis is a curator at DIA Art Foundation, where she is responsible for commissions, exhibitions, public programs, and the permanent collection across DIA's sites and locations. As a curator and scholar with particular interest in minimalism, post-minimalism, and land art, she has been instrumental in the stewardship of DIA's sites, artworks, and expanding the institution's approach to and understanding of land-based practices. There is so much more to her bio that I am not going to read because she is sitting right next to me and she can fill in the blanks. Kimberli Gant, next to Alexis, is the curator of modern and contemporary art at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. She was previously the McKinnon Curator of Modern Art and Contemporary Art at the Chrysler Museum in Norfolk, Virginia, and has also worked at the Mellon Doctoral Fellow at the New York Museum and Director of Exhibitions at the Museum of Contemporary African Diaspora and Arts at MoAD, which is where we met 15 years ago.
Been in the game, y'all. Been in the game.
Here, Kimberli. That's very dramatic. Oh, okay, look at that. Oh, there you are. It's kind of like out of order here, so we'll go back to the front. So, Danny Báez.
That's me.
You know, Danny, I love you.
I love you too.
And I'll tell you why. Because the first time I did anything officially with Danny was 4 years ago during what was then called the Art Wall Conference. And Danny was a reluctant participant because he was like, I don't want to be a panelist in your conference. And I was like, that's exactly why you need to be. So Danny, I'm reading verbatim here. A Dominican-born, New York City-based cultural producer and organizer, director and founder of Regular Normal Gallery, one half of the founding duo behind Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic's premier art fair Mecca that I attended.
Thank you.
Bravo to you. It's no small thing to start an art fair.
Thank you.
Co-founder and board member of Art Noir, a member of the Young Council of El Museo del Barrio, a board member of ISCP. For those of you who don't know, that's the International Studio and Curatorial Program, and a New Art Dealers Alliance. Danny is currently the head of arts at Kickstarter. Congratulations on that new appointment.
Thank you. Thanks.
He firmly believes in the power of building and practicing upon the community and has organized various exhibitions in New York since 2010. Thank you for joining us, Danny.
Thank you.
Very happy to have you here and to talk to you. Now, Rasu is next to Danny and also someone I've known a long time, and oddly enough, haven't seen in years. Like, I don't think I've seen you in person in like 7 years, which is kind of like
I'm AI.
crazy. So Rasu is an accomplished cultural strategist. These tongue twisters in the bios.
Oh yeah, I use vernacular like a motherfucker.
Accomplished cultural strategist. That's like linguistic training. And social sculptor with a wealth of experience in curating, producing, arts administration, arts advocate, and recently appointed executive director of the Brooklyn Arts Council. The first grant I ever received in my professional life as a curator was from the
You're
Brooklyn Arts
welcome.
Council. You weren't there yet, man.
I was in tech at that time. You old.
But thank you. As leader of Brooklyn Arts Council, he leads efforts to support and empower local artists toward achieving the council's vision of generating a self-sustaining, integral, creative community that fosters connectedness and engagement in society. Thank you for joining us today. So,
Yes, sir.
listen, I want to just kind of set some ground rules today because we can do that. Almost everything I've done in the past 4 years of my life has been me in my house, in my office, in front of a computer screen. You are literally the first audience I have been in front of in New York City in over 4 years. So I'm gonna have some fun today.
Yes.
All right, so the first thing is that this series is called Conversations with the Critics, which is kind of like funny and misleading because it's like, who's a critic and what does that even mean, right? So the last time we did this was 4 years ago and it was with arts writers and it was great, but at the same time, I feel like I wanted to move this in a direction that would also include people who are producing, who are curating, who are doing like other things. So I want to start on the far end with you, Rasu. I gave like a weak description of like what you do. Can you take a moment and share with the audience a little bit more about who you are and what you do? I'll give you like a minute or two.
You know I'm loquacious, so I don't know why you don't give me a minute. Peace, y'all. I'm Rasu, native New Yorker, but born in the Caribbean. My background is in tech, and I had a midlife crisis in my 30s and decided to pivot over into the art world. And when I did that, I was working in theater and producing Afropunk and doing all these things, right? And really the epitome of a polymath. And I do not have any technical training in the arts. I just did shit, right? So at one point, there was this incubator being brewed up in New Museum called New Ink. And I see some New Ink folks in here. I'm not gonna point you out. And they wanted to know what it looked like to really think about people of color being in an incubator space, being in an art and tech incubator space. So I got that task. And I was kind of like the Professor X of New Ink, like going out and recruiting people who are weird and doing some weird projects. And these are projects that often you wouldn't see in a traditional art space. They were really edgy. They were on the cutting edge, and they were looking at culture, and they were looking at entrepreneurship, and they were looking at the paradigm in different ways. That type of divergent thinking is my thinking, so I found my tribe, and I was able to recruit my people. After that, I went into philanthropy and did network theory and building ecosystems within philanthropy in New York, New Orleans, and Nairobi. And during that time, it was the pandemic. You and I did a talk on IG Live. I had a breakdown. I had I cried mad times, right? But I had a breakdown, and what it was a purpose breakdown. Like, I was like, why am I in this ivory tower? Why am I in this place? And what is my purpose in this place? And what I realized is that I'm a hyper-local dude. Like, I love Brooklyn. I love New York City, and I feel like New York City was going through a crisis. It was looking at the growth of real estate, and it was looking at the growth of an economic engine, but it was not considering culture. So I put my hat in the game to like be an ambassador, a czar of culture. It happened to be my borough of Brooklyn, right? So now I'm at Brooklyn Arts Council, the first black leader of Brooklyn Arts Council. There's not many people of color who runs arts councils in New York City, believe it or not. But taking on this role and being the youngest person to be the executive director of Brooklyn Arts Council is some heavy weight, but it's exciting. And it's an opportunity to grow and to really put a spotlight on the emergence of practice in Brooklyn and the arts that goes beyond what we imagine what art to be. And I'll stop there.
Thank you for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, so it's like Vegas, house rules, house always wins. Alexis is next. She didn't know that. So I'd love for you to do the same. So Alexis and I, we don't know each other. So everything that she says from this moment on, it'll be the first time I'm hearing it as well. So Alexis, please tell us a little bit more about you.
Okay. Oh my gosh, that's a really you're Rasu. That was a hard act to follow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You could do it.
Okay, so I'm also an almost native New Yorker. You guys all just found out I moved here when I was 10, and I've known that I wanted to work in the arts basically since then. And I actually got my start when I was 16. I got a job working at a printing press, Two Palms Press, amazing place in New York. And I was, because the person who runs that press is amazing, David Lazary, and he's also a little nutty, and he was like, you could just make some stuff. So he let me work on some prints that I was like deeply underqualified to make. And I knew from that point on that I wanted to be able to work with artists. I knew that I was like not at all talented in the making aspect, but that I really thrived in the facilitation aspect of making work. So anyway, I went on to do lots of other things, and right after college, I got an internship working for Creative Time, which is a public arts organization, which was maybe like the most formative thing I've ever done in my professional life. It was with Anne Pasternak, who's currently the director of the Brooklyn Museum, but was at the time the head of Creative Time. And it was a scrappy organization that was also incredibly versatile, and I had to do everything. I had a bunch of different roles there. I was an intern, and then I was a project manager, and I joke sometimes that they put me through grad school because they did. I would come in and do these kind of part-time gigs, which would accommodate my crazy academic schedule. And so as I did all this training as an academic, I was thriving in the role of actually facilitating the making of artwork. And so I got my job at DIA. Anyway, I did a couple other things, and then I got this job at DIA, and what has been truly amazing has been to be able to both think about a historic collection, something that has a kind of iconic vibe, right? It's an institution that's dedicated to art from the 60s and 70s, but which had its founding in the supporting of artists' work, right? DIA's founding mission was to support the visionary work of artists in the realization of ambitious projects that don't fit a traditional box of any sort, right? And for a long time that founding mission was there, and evidenced in the collection in these crazy permanent works of art like the New York Earth Room or the Broken Kilometer, or later projects that they took on like Spiral Jetty, which they didn't fund but which they support, which you should all go see, especially the New York sites, they're amazing. But we weren't doing that for artists today. So what has been really exciting and where I have thrived has been in kind of trying to reinvigorate the commissioning program and finding artists and offering them the chance to do something big, unencumbered. Like, it's okay if it seems insane. That's kind of where we thrive. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. So Danny, I think you and I are probably, maybe we're like the most similar on this panel, only to the extent that I don't have really any idea what you do, and you probably have no idea.
Me neither. I know
no
this,
real
but
idea
I
what I
don't
do
know.
beyond your like title. So I would love to hear a little bit more about the role that you play in the art world. Listen, I know recently you were appointed in this new position at Kickstarter. So maybe we start from before that.
Before that, yes.
And then we get to that.
Yes, sir.
Because you've been on a really interesting journey over the past
I've
5 or
been
6 years.
in not a linear path.
Yeah.
A few sorts. Well, this is too loud, right? My first kind of entry point to the arts was through Thai artist Rick Tiravanisha, which I don't know if any of you is familiar with him. It's a relation aesthetic, kind of like the godfather of relation aesthetics. And my friend from Puerto Rico, Gloria Marta Linares, who still to this day is the kind of main assistant for Rick, offered me a 3-day job back in 2008. 3 days. Okay. Yes.
Good job.
Actually, she's supposed to be here, but her plane arrived late, so. So 3-day job. The second day of doing this gig, it was with Eflux magazine with the magazine when it was stationed in Chinatown. And it was a conversational stuff for Rick and Nico Dox, which is a Belgian artist. And my job was to change the magazine of the camera that we're using, which was a BODE from France from the 70s, which I was supposed to be the film guy, but you know, Dominicans never say they don't do anything. They know everything. But I was very nervous to fuck it up, so I said, I don't know how to do that one. So I learned how to do the magazine change, and that was my job. And then Rick asked me to do a few other things. Long story short, the second day, he was asking me my name, what I want to do, where I come from, what it's called for. I went to school for advertising, by the way, college. One of my fellow classmates for 20 plus years is Tony right here, who is an amazing artist. So he knows also like my whole trajectory of this. And he walks away. And I'm like, okay, cool, well, that was nice. And then my friend said, you hire? I said, yeah, I know, I've been working here for 2 days now. And then she said, no, you hire. I said, I'm confused, what do you mean? I said, you start full-time on Tuesday at the studio. And from that, I spent 3 years of my life working with Rick. He is a professor at Columbia University, so I assist with a passport project that took 2.5 years to be completed because in the middle of the project, he got sick, and it delayed the whole process. So once I was done with that, I was back again looking for a job because the studio didn't have money to pay. During that time, he had a solo show at Gavin Brown, who was his gallery at the moment, who is still his guy, but under other galleries now. And I was prepping soup for people to give away. So that was my job, and then I was printing shirts too. Gavin came to me one day. I was very intimidated by Gavin. He was not a friendly person at all. If you know Gavin Brown, you know what I'm talking about. So one day he said, I like the way you work, let's talk. And he asked me what I was doing and asked me to come help Rick with the class at his home in Harlem, and come today, 3 days. That led to be 7.5 years of my life with Gavin Brown, his wife, Hope Atherton. And in the middle of that, I was allowed to go, I was tasked to go to art fairs because I spoke Spanish. So I was be sent to like Spanish-speaking places, and Miami as well. As you know, Miami is fully Spanish-speaking city in the United States. And from there, you know, got acquaintance with the whole process of dealing art. But then I hit a point that I was, what else I can do? Does anybody else gonna employ me if this is over? And because I was kind of like wanting to stick around and looking for solutions of how I'm gonna make that happen, I asked my friend, do you think I have a future in this business? And she said, no. I said, why? Because you didn't go to school for art history. So that was very painful, but it also fueled me to the highest level. Next time you know, I started the only international art fair in the Caribbean because I want to prove, not to her, but to myself, but especially her, that I could do this shit. And understanding that perhaps the way I look and not having the requirements, what it's asked for someone that wants to delve into the arts, I have to create my own employment. So I started with Tony Rodriguez, make an art fair in 2015. Actually happened for the first time in physical form in 2017, San Juan, Puerto Rico, 3 editions there. The first one done in my country was this year in 2023, in March, which was 20 years since I left the country. And I came back with this project. It was surreal, to say the least. In the middle of that, too, in 2013, alongside my brother and your brother, Larry Osei Mensah, and 5 amazing women, we started Art Noir, which is the reference for many things that Black and brown people do today, which was not expected because we started as friends going to places to kind of open up to Black and brown people, say, hey, this is happening here, you're allowed to come, this is not only for white people. We all respect the white people in the audience. And that transformed to the 501c3 that is today. And in 2020, the pandemic, after we did the artwork conference, and the pandemic hit, I'm bored. I cannot do the fair. There's nothing to do. So I decided to do something that I was not a fan of, which was a gallery. So I decided to start a gallery in New York City, in Chinatown, in 2020, in November. That's when Regular Normal started to function. It still happens today. We don't have a physical space, but we've been doing fairs since we closed the last space in October 2021. During that time, I've been privileged to do Freeze LA, Independent New York, NADA, Miami, you name it, and a couple of others. The only one that I haven't done is Art Basel, because I don't want to do it yet. Fast forward to 2023, I kind of say I need a new challenge. And I noticed that Kickstarter was looking for a head of arts. And my friend Patton Hindle was the person that was taking care of that department. And before Patton was Victoria Rogers, who you probably guys know. So I approached the CEO, who is my friend, Everett Taylor, and say, I want to take this job. And he said, that's cute, but you have to apply online. Like everybody else. And I was like, damn. I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna get it now. So anyways, I went for it, I applied, and I got the job. So now I can kind of somehow bring whatever I learned throughout this time in the arts and whatever way I operate into Kickstarter, understanding that there's limitations, of course, because it's a company that has rules and policies. But now I have, I think, a bigger platform to help the creative community. So that is my short story.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, no small thing, no small thing. And so, Kimberly, I saved you for last because I've known you like a long time, and you were there at kind of sort of at what I feel like the start of everything that I eventually would do in the art world. But anyway, enough about me. Let's talk about you. Please share some more about your career. A couple of minutes about what you've been up to in the past few years.
Sure, I'm gonna get a little, there we go, because Jesse's a little short. That would be me. So hi everyone, good evening, thanks for coming out. I probably feel like my career has been the most traditional out of everyone on the panel. All my degrees are in art history. I did a very kind of traditional training, but I got into art, and I want to give full credit to my family. I really got into art through osmosis, I like to kind of say, because my parents took my sister and I to art shows, museums, cultural fairs, studio visits from the time that I was little, bought art. I grew up with art. I grew up with images of people who looked like me, from the earliest memories that I have. And as an adult, I recognize how that isn't something that a lot of us get. And just, not just the images of like my family and my ancestors, but just images by, now major artists. And at the time when I was little, I was just like, oh my God, it's another thing my parents are dragging me to. And then I went to undergrad and I stole my roommate's life, as I like to say. So I was going to be a double major in English and chemistry and write the world's first interesting chemistry textbook. Wow. I was 18. Let's put that into context. And my college roommate was going to do art history. And I was like, how is that a real job? Which my parents would have also agreed with me at the time. But I also really loved history, took some classes, took an art history class, fell in love, told my parents, I'm going to be an art historian, to which they said, no, you're not. That is not why we took you into the art world. And I was like, well, why? They're like, so that you could get a real job and be cultural and actually have good conversations. And I was like, I can still do that and actually still get paid, which they were like, okay, fine. So, I was very lucky. But also, like I think everyone on the panel, life goes into very kind of flowing ways. My dad was in advertising. I worked in advertising for several years while I was trying to get a job in the arts, and was able to kind of move to New York, make a career, and got into grad school while I was working, and then decided I was going to get my PhD, which if y'all want to talk about that, I'm happy to, because that is a journey.
I also have notes.
Yes, I was like, so that's the whole thing. But, for me, and I've always worked in museums. It's, again, my career has been very traditional in that way. I've worked in different types of museums. I'm very proud Chicagoan, and have been able to live in other parts of the country, especially the South, where I did my doctorate and where I've worked for several years. So been able to really experience working in institutions and environments where I wasn't sure how comfortable I was going to be outside of the bubble of kind of the art moments that I had there. And so it's been an interesting journey for me, just kind of living in different cities and having to adapt. And, artist names that we kind of all know here, there I'm trying to introduce them to folks. But it also gave me an opportunity to really experience really, like you said, Rasu, like local art scenes and what was happening there, and talking to artists. And that to me is what I think is the crux of my career, is just talking to artists and trying to get them, and being an advocate and being exposed and getting them opportunities, getting their work in collections. That is really something that's very important to me, and I continue that. And I'm really excited to be back in New York, though, and working at an incredible museum that really advocates for artists and really tries to advocate for community. And that really aligns with what my missions and goals are. And excited to hopefully see you guys at the Brooklyn Museum, seeing some of the shows we're going to do. So, yay. Thank you.
So thank you for sharing that. Oftentimes when I try to impress I have a 20-year-old son, when I try to impress him, I tell him, I know people who work at museums, and he goes like, who do you know? And then I tell him, like, people like you, and he goes, oh, really? Okay, cool. So it's great to be able to do that. Thank you. Rasu, I'm gonna go back to you, because we're here in New York City, and I think that it's important to kind of like contextualize today's conversation as it relates to the folks that are here. I'm quite sure most people here either live in or maybe they were born in but live in the city. And can you talk a little bit about like the role of Brooklyn Arts Council as it relates to the artists in New York City? Like, what does Brooklyn Arts Council, in your opinion, like represent to individual artists in Brooklyn, and maybe perhaps by extension the city?
Yeah, sure. So, everyone knows, well, let me not assume everyone knows. There is Department of Cultural Affairs, who is the kind of arbiter of giving money throughout New York City. And then there's a state level called NYSCA, or New York State Council on the Arts. So we're kind of an intermediary of DCA, or Department of Cultural Affairs, where they give money out to 5 boroughs Queens, Staten Island, Bronx, Manhattan, and Brooklyn. Those 5 boroughs, each borough has a council. Well, Queens is in question right now, but each borough has a council. And those councils, the role of the council is to distribute money directly to artists. So we're a grassroots intermediary to make sure that artists has the capacity and funding to build their art, to make their art. And it's all genres. I have a lot of questions around like where does tech and art play into this, because there is no distinction for that. More to come. With that, beyond the grants, we also do professional development, how to write a grant. You know, this is one of the most underutilized resources. How to write a grant, how to scope a grant, how to write it, how to build a budget, giving you narrative reviews, the whole 9 yards, that when you're going out to get the bigger grants like a Ford or Mellon, if you don't have that skill set, we help onboard people with that skill set. Additional to that, we also do residencies in classrooms and adult centers, right? So classrooms through what the city calls CASA, we put teaching artists in classrooms in all the districts in Brooklyn, right? So each arts council do that for their particular borough. Beyond that, we also work with the council people to put teaching artists in adult centers or elderly homes in districts throughout Brooklyn as well. So if we really look at the ecosystem, we're pretty much walking people from young age to elderly, from cradle to the grave with art, and ingesting and investing and granting funds. And these are micro grants, right, from $2,000 to $5,000. What I'm working on is getting more unrestricted funds, meaning that it's not we are getting money from the city, public money. We also get private funding as well, and giving it to very specific distinctions of art. I want to broaden the language and vernacular of art, right? It's beyond those categories, right? We just went through a pandemic. I have a hunch there will be a post-pandemic art label at some point, right? What is that? And the only way that we can figure that out is by seeding people and investing in people to create art outside of this post-pandemic era, and what does that actually look like? It's a lot of digital stuff, just a heads up. So, with that said, that's the kind of breadth of the Brooklyn Arts Council. We don't present, but we used to. We used to do a film festival back in the days. The Lower Manhattan Cultural Council does a River to River festival, and they also have a residency program on Governor's Island. So each arts council has their own kind of pedigree. Ours is really a hyper-local focus, and I will say this because I could brag about it, we are the arts council that delivers the most funding to artists of any other borough. So we give for example, this past year we gave $1.6 million to 280 artists, right? So that is the biggest amount of money arts council have given, borough-led arts council have given to artists, to the most artists. Full stop.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, thank you. So, because it's in the evening, no one got out of the bed this morning for this, but let's assume that they all did. Like, the people got out of the bed this morning to hear our opinions. So, Alexis, I'd love to hear, like, and again, I'm not asking each of you the same question, so don't get comfortable. Don't start listening to the answer of the other person thinking like, well, how would I answer that question? It's not gonna be volleyed over to you. So, Alexis, tell me, like, what excites you about the art world right now? Like, what are the things that you find to be compelling and interesting? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they kind of like get you going.
That's a really hard one. Danny agrees. I think it's actually probably the same thing that has always been, which is seeing artists who are making work that helps me totally, like at a totally personal level, think about the problems of the world differently. I know that sounds maybe idealistic or cheesy, but you know, when I think about things, so I work a lot on land issues with land, and I work with artists who have used the earth in various capacities in an era of like global ecological crisis. It is, I see so many artists using earth as a material and treating the materiality of the earth with a kind of respect and reciprocity that is central to how we are going to be able to solve some of our problems today. So I think that's been something exciting for me and interesting, which is to say, like, people who've taken come from a wide variety of formal traditions, but who have landed at a place where the earth becomes a kind of central material that can teach us. I don't know.
No, that's great, and I'm actually quite curious about land art. I want to just kind of let the audience know.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you may have some questions in the back of your mind that you came into this room today wanting to ask, and maybe what they're saying might tweak those questions a bit. But don't lose those questions, because you will have an opportunity to ask them. Kimberli, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Right? So it's another kind of doozy, and that is, what is the difference between what you perceived as like being a professional working in the art world versus the realities of it?
That's a good one.
Yeah. It's interesting, because I think when I initially thought I was going to work in it, it was a question of whether I was going to teach or working in institutions. And so going through school, I realized, okay, I do like research, but I don't enjoy only doing that. I love being in the library, but I also love talking to living artists. I did not enjoy teaching when I was a TA. I was like, absolutely not. But I think it's really important. All my family are teachers. I love teachers. Teachers are great. You are so important.
But keep it real.
I was like, but that's not what I want to do. But I think what was interesting, I mean, I probably had a very naive understanding of it, in the sense of, I don't actually think I knew what I was really going to do. I just knew, I'm going to do this thing. But you never actually learn what that is. I mean, you're taught how to research. That is what you learn in school. So then when I would intern, I was like, I'm doing a lot of scans, doing a lot of photocopying. But then I remember I interned one summer at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, and they were having a Saul LeWitt exhibition, a big solo show of his, and I was in contact with the studio, like, trying to arrange his hotel and, like, flight information. I was like, should I be the person doing this? So, like, there were very random things. And so then once I definitely got into it, and I was working at MoAD at the time, the Museum of Contemporary African Diaspora and Arts, where I met Dexter, and I was going to grad school, that's when I realized the difference of what I understood that was happening in academia to what the practicalities of the business of art is. And I think that's the biggest distinction, is school does definitely teach you, I think, how to think, and it teaches you how to kind of approach, okay, if I want to find this information, how do I go about doing that thing? Which you can transition into your day-to-day in, okay, I've got all of these tasks, how am I going to get them done? So you kind of start to think in a more logical way like that. But what I was doing on my to-do list, completely different. So, and having also getting to work in corporate work before I went back into art history, it was very much going like, okay, I'm having to make sure this legal paperwork is to the artist. I'm having to make sure that these documents are signed. Like, I am on my email all the time. And that is not what I think I would have imagined that's what I would have done, just kind of thinking of what I was going to do. I thought it'd be like interviewing artists and doing studio visits and just things that I do, but things I do less than what I would like to do. Yeah. And I think the other thing that's very different is, like in any job, there's also kind of seasons. So at 1 minute, it's like I'm much more in the research and the talking and the book side. Then it's like, now I'm in the, okay, I'm on Excel is my bitch. I am just like in Excel all day. And I'm in PowerPoint all day. And then I go back to, I'm back with the artist. And then I'm installing. And then I'm in, so every project is an A to Z where you're doing, kind of different things. So what I've really appreciated about my career is that I have learned, and I will also just say this as a bit of a tangent, I really appreciate the fact that I've worked at small museums first. So like you, I had to learn the A to Z of curating a show.
Yeah, it's
And
really different in a small museum.
Very different. And Lori Cumbo, who is now our Commissioner of Art here in New York, who was my first boss, I got hired and she said, we got a NISCA grant, Brooklyn Arts Council grant, to work with visual aids to do a show. You're gonna curate it. I had never curated a day in my life. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how to do it. And this is where I really much appreciated the fact that I'd come from a corporate advertising like, well, we'll just see what happens background before, because I just started cold emailing other curators whose shows I had seen and appreciated and go, will you please meet with me? I don't know how to do my job. I'd really appreciate some advice. And now I'm friends with a lot of those people still.
Yeah.
So that's a very long-winded way of just saying we all kind of have an idea, and then our reality is just like,
It's different.
that's it. That's interesting.
That's different.
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, truth be told, I often refer to Lori Cumbo, who you've mentioned, as like an integral part of my, and it's hard to say this without it sounding like self-centered, but like my origin story, in the sense that it was Lori Cumbo who gave me my first opportunity to curate a museum exhibition, and that was the catalyst to like everything that I would go on to do after that. And I point that out only reason is because I think that it's important to identify those catalytic moments that can kind of change your trajectory and make you sort of perceive yourself in a different way. But that's all well and good. I want to ask a really tough question to you, Danny.
No, come on.
And that is, the art world as we know it, and everyone's perception of the art world is different. But to some extent, it has its issues. I mean, some might say there's some things about it that are broken that could be fixed. Is there something, in your opinion, that's broken about the art world that could be fixed?
The galleries.
Talk about that.
It's pretty much based on the speculation of an artist when they come into the her, right? Understanding that optics are optics, but they do not practice that, and may believe that. I'm not taking away anything from the makers here. You price your things the way you think you should be paid for, but there's things that get out of hand, and that is not sustainable long term. That is one. It's one of the many issues, and it's one that I deal with more constantly based that I have a fair, I have a gallery, and all this stuff, and I see that on a daily basis. Is galleries will take the artist, the hype of the artist, the momentum, bringing into the space, elevate the prices to astronomical amounts, and then drop them. And then what happens? The gallery gets somebody else to show, but what happened with that person that was there before? And artists are not, I mean, it's cool to have that money in your hands, but you also have to have the power to say, no, I believe that my career at this point should be this and that, and I want to stay here longer than what you expected me to stay. That is one thing. And the flipping business, it's being a business that's going on for many years, but only few people have access to that, and from the selling point to the buying point. And that is something that also hurts careers, because sometimes the estimate asked for a piece can be lower than the lower, or not even getting close to the high. And unfortunately, the market operates in a mental state of like, if it doesn't reach that, it's not valuable anymore, which is not true.
Yeah.
And the buyer's gonna keep buying. The artist is the one that's gonna be affected. So at the end of the day, the artist is the most like vulnerable like subject in the business. And what you see in the internet or Instagram these days, if you see your homies making whatever, selling out the shows, that doesn't translate the same for everybody. You have to go through your own path. That doesn't like, hey, this person was charging 40K. I'm gonna charge 40K too. But you don't know how the person got to 40K. You don't know if it's fabricated or for real. And that is, I think right now, the main issue that I see in the artwork when it comes to business. If we go to the spaces that Dr. Kimberli Gant occupies is the point of being performative and not really giving black people and brown people the tools to succeed at the positions they're being, appointed to, just to look good in front of everybody else and say like, hey, we got this black person and he's a woman too. Can you, get off the leash on us now?
Right.
But what happens afterwards? After you announce, after you go to New York Times, after you go to Hyperallergic and you go all this stuff, does this person has the tools to keep moving forward and really do the job that they need to do? But that's a more deeper conversation, but I'm just talking about the part of the business of the arts, how the artist has been like pretty much raped somehow, and not many people is coming forward for them, because once you drop out, unfortunately, people don't want to touch you any longer. Yeah. And I give you examples. I'm not gonna say names, but people that were like that hot thing, and remember, hot can be put out with water. You don't want to be a hot item at the moment or the hot artist. You want to be the artist that stay long term in the game. So keep in mind that the power of saying no is huge.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel comfortable, if you understand that this is not the way, nobody can blackmail you or say like, oh, your career. Because I heard big galleries in Europe telling artists that, oh, if you don't show with us, you're done. What kind of relationship is that? So you suggest the person to like either do it with me, or you're like, I'm gonna like make sure that nobody touch your art. Nah, that's not true. If that happens, and if you're going through that stuff with any gallery, come to me. I mean it.
Yeah.
I'm for real.
Yeah, and getting a lawyer.
Yes.
So I get asked the question pretty often from artists at all stages of their career. It doesn't even really matter. So, Alexis, you're with Dia. Kimberli, you're with Brooklyn Museum. Danny, you're with Kickstarter. Rasu, you're with Brooklyn Arts Council. I happen to know you. I sometimes will send you an introduction to random people that you're like, why are you introducing me to this person? And I'm like, I'll tell you why.
Seeing is hot.
I'll tell you why. Every opportunity I've ever received in my professional life was the result of someone seeing something in me and taking a shot and saying, I'm going to introduce you to people in my network. And I don't take that for granted, so I often do that, right? But there are a lot of people I recognize that feel sort of on the outside of things, right? And I'll tell you a quick little story about feeling on the outside. So back in 2008, so we're talking about 15 years ago, I'll never forget this. It was a pretty critical year in my life. We're going to be frank here, so I'm going to tell you some things you probably don't want to hear, or maybe you didn't think I would say. 2008 was a crazy year for me, because in addition to it being the financial crisis, which had a huge impact on my financial well-being as a business owner, and so like that point in between me being in the advertising and marketing world and coming into the art world is also the year that I lost my mother, right? So it was a very, very difficult time. And I was thinking about the art world as this new space for me to almost reinvent myself, right? And I remember walking through Chelsea sometime in 2018 and coming to the conclusion, I don't know anybody here, right? I had a lot of friends and relationships and other aspects of my life, but it's I didn't know anybody here, and how the hell am I gonna make these relationships, right? It's almost a mini miracle when I think back on that versus the journey I've been on since then. And that's probably why I'm so dedicated to the idea of working with emerging artists who feel the similar way, because I can really feel that, right? But oftentimes I will get questions from artists about how do they make those relationships with people. And I'd love to hear from, and I'm gonna leave this we're gonna call this if we're playing cards. It's the wild card. Anyone can grab this one, right? If an artist says yeah, that's all well and good, but I've been making work for years and no one's paying any attention to me. How do I make connections? How do I get in? What do you say to that?
I'm going to jump in here quickly.
Please, Alexis.
I also get this all the time from young curators, which is the art world, which is not a monolith, but in the broadest possible sense, is pretty relational.
Yeah, very relational.
And
very cliquey.
it's so cliquey and sceney. And
That's why I left America.
that's why I live upstate.
I'm in Harlem.
But I think that my advice is similar to both young artists or emerging artists, emerging happening at any stage in somebody's life, right? Emerging artist is not necessarily a young artist, and an emerging curator. And that is that this is one small aspect of getting in the door, but literally you have to knock on the door. And I think that the power of just cold calling people cannot be underestimated. Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised at how willing people are to answer an email. Every time I get a student or a young, I answer them no matter what, because actually I also wrote Ann Pasternak being like, can I please invite you to come talk to my class?
Yeah.
Right? And I think the same is true for artists as well. When I get those emails, I respond. I can't necessarily do something for that person, but it plants a seed, and then that seed grows, and you do that to enough people, and things happen. And that is one small thing that also can't be underestimated if you are, like me, not naturally inclined towards talking to people that you don't already know. Like, I'm shy, right? So I think you just gotta launch it and launch it and launch it, and something lands.
Anyone else want to jump in on that?
You can also slide into the DMs, but bring quality, please.
Yeah.
Quality?
Yes, because there's a difference between being an artist and being artistic skill. And I'm very harsh on this point because I cannot make art at all. I have no skills whatsoever, so I know that. So I hope everybody understands that on their ends too. And for whatever reason, I always respond every DM that I get, even if it's late. Nobody gets an answer unless you're being violent or very pushy. Otherwise, you will get an answer from me. But nowadays, Instagram is the #1 communication system. So people slide into the DMs, use that, but also go to the openings. And
Yeah.
it sounds very like, oh, whatever, yeah, of course, but I'm like socially awkward, I don't know, do it. Just talk to other people, approach them, say hi to the artist, even if the artist is getting like hugged or flowers by everybody, just say, hey, what up, I love your work, whatever. It can be very short and sweet. And yeah, I don't know about the emails. My email is very public, so many people have found the email, but since like Instagram is more like open
Yes.
for everybody, like I get more DMs than emails. So, be careful how you approach the person that you want to be in touch with, but also be intentional and be upfront of what you need and what would you like that person to do for you.
And before we get to you, Rasu, don't lose your thought. I want to just pause for a moment to come back to what you're saying about approach and I just want to get into little like tactical things here. Because I get a lot of inbound emails, but I also send a lot of emails. I think it's arguable. It's entirely possible I send more emails than I receive, which might sound crazy, right? But I think it's true. And language and sort of like cadence and kindness and politeness in the emails is something I'm very, very conscious about. Yes. And I just want to take a moment and pause on that, because like if all of you came here tonight, if you're artists and you're like, oh, I didn't get anything from that at all. I want to make sure we all get something from this, right? Including me. And one thing I would say is that when you're emailing someone that you've never emailed before, I think it's important to be patient.
Yes.
Yeah, please do.
That's the main thing. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
If there's like nothing else I could say, it's like be patient, because there are many times when I know, and I won't just say for me because I'm just one person with one life experience, but there are many times when I've even talked to other people where you might receive an email from someone that you are quite interested in it, but it might take you a while to get back. And it's important to just like recognize that and know that you're not necessarily being ignored. There's a certain amount of time. 6 months is too long, but there is a certain amount of time. You're over there like, I need 6 months. No, it's too long. There's a certain amount of time that you want to give, But then I'd also think it speaks to something else that I want to share before I come back to the audience here, is that there's a couple of things that I've learned in my life, and I'm gonna share some like more with you, right? So like 6 months ago, I felt not so qualified to give out like a lot of advice, but you know, I turned 50 last month, so I feel like I'm.
You look good, brother. You look good.
So good.
So like now I can give out advice, right?
Skincare.
Right. So
Regime talk here.
so like one of the things that I've become very clear on is that you have to be kind to people. Yes. And you have to show care even when you don't feel like you know the person. Like,
Yes.
that's really important. The other thing is that no matter what you're going through emotionally, before you send a message out to someone that you want to collaborate with, you have to realize that they don't know. They just don't know. So you have to remove any sense of desperation or anxiety from the message, and you have to just kind of like say it like it is, so that it is not colored with a lot of the other stuff, right? Because I know exactly what it's like to send out that 20th or 30th email to another person who you think is not going to answer you, right? But you can't bring all of that to the 30th email. It's got to be fresh and clear, you know? And I think that's just something important to talk about. I'm not going to belabor the point, but I'd love to get to what you were going to say, Rasu.
No, I think that's really helpful. And I think if you move in fear, you're doing yourself a tremendous disservice, right? Like if you just fear feedback, if you fear what a person's going to say, you're paralyzing yourself and your advancement. And you know, when I start to fear something, that's when I move, because I know I have to get past that. But to your point, I'm terrible at emails. I'm better in person. Yeah, so you can approach, people approach me in the street all the time. I'll sit there and talk with them. My son actually hates it. He's like, you got to talk to everybody? You got to talk to everybody. Yes. Right? So I actually have, it's not a formula, but it's what I listen for when a person talks, and I'm just going to give it to you. Who are you? What do you do? And why do you do it? Most people do the first two. Who are you? I'm such and such, and this is what I do. But they forget the why. And the why is connected to a spiritual why. I'm doing this because my mom, I went to, you know, my parents took me to, right? That's the human connection part. All the other stuff is arbitrary and surface, transactional even.
Yes, sir.
Right? So the why is what I listen to, because that's what's going to pull me into you, right? There's another piece. I always ask a person, how can I help you? If you beat me to that, you did your job. So who are you, what you do, why you do it, and what is it you need? What are you actually asking? So the authenticity has to be there. The worst thing for me is for a person to tap dance for months before they make the ask, because now you're wasting my time, right? So who are you, what you do, why you do it, and what is it you need? Or what is the value proposition even in the conversation? And I hate the word value proposition, but it's the best word I can use right now. It's like, why is this happening, right? So I think get into that, and I'll just color it with this last layer is, I've built mentor programs multiple times on universities for the museum, mentor programs. And one of the things that when I'm coaching artists on engaging with the mentors to come prepared, what is it you need advice on?
Yes.
So many of us are so tied up and so sensitive to our idea. Everyone has an idea. The magic is getting feedback on that idea so it can be realized. So if you have an idea and you're keeping it precious and you're not bringing it to existence, you're doing yourself a big disservice. And by bringing it to existence and sharing it with someone, it germinates and it becomes an entity to be realized.
Thank you.
That's incredibly good advice for any aspect of your professional life. I see that all the time with colleagues where I'm like, what? There's like, you had an idea, but why didn't you just tell us what the thing was? We've been trying to feel it around. It's incredibly good advice.
Thank you for sharing that. So, in the spirit of continuing to tell you more things about me than you care to know, I often will go on these rants in my house, and my wife, she's such a good wife. She'll say like, I'll be like, man, what is wrong with these people? What is going on here? Like, why can't people just like do it this way? And like sending me these emails, it doesn't make any sense. And what's wrong with this? What's wrong with these artists? And what's wrong with this curator? And what's wrong with this museum? And it's freaking school. And what's happening here? And she'd be like, why are you doing this? And I'd be like, because I love it. I absolutely love it. And I only illustrate that to say, like, I think that the art world writ large is like really more complex than most people who are not involved in it sort of understand. It is like I know, like, speaking from my own personal standpoint, I am a senior critic here at New York Academy of Art. I'm also a curator, and I run an online education platform called CreativeStudy. But more than any of that stuff, I'm just like a human being, just trying to figure things out and figure like my life out. And it gets really frustrating from time to time, just balancing all of those things. And I'm just curious to know, because everyone here either, and I know like you're full time at the museum, but you've done a lot of different things. Like what is your how do you cope with the pressures of the work that you do? Right? Very briefly, anyone that wants to chime in on this, that's like a softball question, because I got a hardball question coming after it. So like anyone who wants to chime in on like coping mechanisms with like dealing with stress. And I'm saying this not because I'm necessarily concerned with like how someone who has a full-time job at like Brooklyn Arts Council like deals with stress, because there might be people who are just like independent artists and they're like, dude, I don't know when I'm going to sell my next work, so like I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills, so that's a different kind of stress. But it's more like dealing with the world, like contextualizing all of the pressures that we're under. Like what are some of the things that you do to kind of deal with all of that?
I was gonna say, I'll quickly say one thing that I do that I've, especially with the pandemic, and I'm very lucky that I live close to Prospect Park, and I don't get to do, so I'm lucky enough that I discovered in the spring that I can walk fast and I can walk to work. And it's like one thing that doesn't cost me any money. I can listen to a podcast, I can listen to an audiobook, I can just listen to the day. And it does help me just kind of work through. I find that I can think through things when I move, and so it just helps me kind of process, like to get the day started, to end the day, and especially in the spring, like I can walk to and from work, and then on the weekends I just try and do one giant loop around the park and like start my day that way. And I'm not trying to be like, we gotta all be physical, like do what you want to do, but it is one thing that. Again, it doesn't cost me any money, which I really, because we know New York is expensive. And it'd be very easy just to like go for another glass of wine or like a beer. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like that has been a coping mechanism too. I mean, let's be real about that. But I'm trying not to be quite as bad about that. And so, just to walk. And also, I've been reading a lot more, I'm gonna say a lot more. Instagram has been feeding me a lot more notes about just also reminding me that I'm doing the best I damn well can.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a very simple, easy phrase. Like, we are, we're busy a lot. We're trying to do our jobs well. We're trying to look good. We're trying to be centered. We're trying to eat well. Like, we're trying to do 18 billion things within like an 8-hour, 9-hour day. And you can't get it done. Like, life management and work management don't always work out. So I just have to remind myself, that didn't get done today. It'll be there tomorrow. Yes. And you're gonna do some larger percentage on life, some larger amount on work, and it's eventually, it'll get there. So just remind yourself, like, you're doing great. You are all doing great. Just remind yourself of that.
I always, I have a mantra. There are no art emergencies unless the building's on fire or somebody is injured.
Yes.
I have put the building on fire, so I know what's real. But like, I think to that point, right, you are doing great. That email can wait.
Yes.
There's a sense of urgency that I think comes, especially with living in a city like New York that is so dense, that you just have to channel out of yourself because it doesn't actually help you focus on the actual task.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's various things that I do for, relaxing or coping with stress. But as recent as, maybe April, May, not now because the season's restarted and it's kind of busy, but I've been going to upstate New York every weekend to my friend's house. That's being one of my ways of like relaxing and smoking cigars and other smoking stuff. And
Did you just say cigars to be PC?
no, but I do smoke cigars. I enjoy that, but I enjoy all this stuff too. But the most constant one between August and May, my coping mechanism is watching sports, like soccer, especially football. That relaxes me like nothing else, for some reason. It gave me stress about the game, yes, but it made me forget about my duties in a way, not like that I won't do this, I forgot about doing this, but it helps me to feel at peace. And then after the match or whatever, the next day, which is usually a weekday, I go back to my normal life. So I think like that's the main one, which sounds very weird too, but yeah, it's real.
Yeah. Life balance is really important to me. I'm a perpetual workaholic, and I think it's really important that I love the city, and the city has all these like nooks and crannies of deliciousness in it, and I like to find it. So for me, I have a master's in MBWA, Management by Walking Administration, right? So, yeah, so I'm on the phone and I'm walking, especially if I have a meeting, I always ask people, can I get off camera, right? Because if you think about the camera, just the energetic sphere of it, like being on Zoom. I know a lot of us want to be on Zoom, but you're not having a human interaction where I'm giving you energy, you give me energy back. You're giving energy to a machine that's just sucking you all day. Right? And then we're just depressed after that because there's no reciprocation. So for me, I go into nature, I walk around, that's really important. Play fighting with my son is really important, And then the last thing I would say is healing. Like really taking time to heal, being a black kid growing up in New York City, minding to my healing business. Right, like really addressing the trauma that exists and is a work in progress. So I have a collective called Men at Work Healing. And I saw Human and Malcolm in here. Where y'all at? Oh, there you go. So those are brothers that's in my network. And what we do is we have a focus on, healing the masculine, right? Like the masculine is being attacked by society. That is actually by design, right? So how do we redesign ourselves where we're like really putting in the effort, the art of self, like looking at that and really approaching it from a different paradigm that's not patriarchy has actually impacted us as well. So how do we look at that differently? Long way to say walking, playing with my son, and healing. That's how I tend to myself.
Thank you. So I have a final question before we open it up to questions. And like I said, the last one was kind of like a softball, so this one's not a softball. So we have, more or less, you could say we have representatives of DIA, Brooklyn Museum, Kickstarter, Brooklyn Arts Council, and I often think about like the responsibility that I have to the artists that I collaborate with, and to the people who I connect with through the various ways that I work in the art world. And someone asked me recently, like what is like the motivating factor? And I said, like, it is that sense of responsibility, right? And I'd love to hear from each of you to sort of like talk about like what's your perspective on the responsibility that you might have as an arts professional to the arts community, or even vis-a-vis the organizations that you work with. And you can let me know if you want me to sort of like explain or articulate like what that question really means a bit more. But so the core of the question is like, what do you feel is your responsibility to artists?
Well, on my end, I think it's keep opening doors. You know, there's a misuse of the word gatekeepers. It's more like gate openers. And my responsibility right now is create somehow a blueprint for whoever comes after me has a better understanding of where they're stepping into it, and they can actually succeed at what they're doing, because I'm not gonna be here forever. So I have to leave the knowledge behind for somebody else to take over and pass it along. That's the only rule I tell people. If I go for you and I pick you to like teach you something, you have to give it to somebody else. So my responsibility is just keep opening whatever like spaces I am in for the ones that really want to be in and want to do the job. Because there's a lot of like misunderstanding of like, oh, but I want to get in, but then you don't do anything, you don't bring anything to the table, in the sense of like, you don't contribute the way it's supposed to be done. And especially me being from the Caribbean, I have to look out for my people, because there's also misconception about, hey, this, and with all due respect to anybody that, you know, identifies as Latino, Latinx, I respect that, I support that, but I don't use the terms for myself. I'm a Caribbean person, like, which is also like a whole nother complex topic. Yes, and I'm here for everybody. That's the truth. I'm very honest, open. People that know me for a long time knows that I'm about that. But I especially want to bring my people to the forefront somehow and make sure that they keep like replicating that for whoever coming next. So that's that.
I probably go two parts. So one is, I'd love to say that I am trying to kind of like reprogram the gatekeeping at big institutions, but I feel like that's giving myself way too much credit, because I don't think I can actually do that, at least in a big way. I think what I can do is, probably like the rest of us, I can help provide opportunities. I can provide education to my peers and those in leadership to say, you have a particular understanding of the art world, let me expand your viewpoint. So that allows for more things to happen. And I think secondly is helping to create a legacy for the artists by, in addition to, you know, having them show at a world-class institution, but also I think helping to provide the scholarship. You know, there's it's great when you have the show, but you know, the show's for a certain amount of time and that goes away. Maybe there's some, you know, installation images, so on and so forth, but it's like, let's do the writing, let's do the research. Let's also make sure that, similar to like generations in my, you know, in my peer group and after, can use that material, that written legacy, and help propel more knowledge forward. And so I think that is just as important as the kind of, as the spectacle of the show, is also being able to leave something behind in a written form to further that knowledge into the future.
So I'm gonna, do you wanna go first?
No, you go.
I'm gonna piggyback because I've been working at a museum for a really long time, but I'm also about to go work at a commercial gallery, and I think that, Hauser and Wirth, and I think that my answer today will probably be pretty different than it would be then, but I think as curators, as people who are primarily responsible for making things visible, right? We are facilitators who make things visible for other people to do that. I mean, we do that scholarship ourselves, but I think of I provide a service which is to make things available for other people as resources. Mm-hmm. And I am a facilitator because I work with living artists to help them speak, right? I'm like an editor in some ways,
Yeah.
right? I'm there to help shape and resource. And I think that, so things that I'm interested in, or that I've been thinking about a lot, have to do with access, who can get there. And, you know, I think it's interesting that you thought the galleries are the biggest problem, because one thing that I've been thinking about a lot is galleries are free. And they're
To go visit.
to go visit. They're free to go
Not when it
visit.
comes to the business.
No, but I'm thinking, so from a public perspective,
Oh, okay.
as a kind of curator, I've thought a lot about access to the museum,
Yes.
or to
Should be free,
museums,
yes.
Right.
versus
Yes.
access to galleries, right? And I think that there are, I, as a museum professional who is now going to work in a commercial space, in a funny way, almost as a research project, like, what's it like on the other side?
Right.
As a curator.
Thought experiment.
Like, how do we continue to make that resource, which is the work that artists make and which helps us process the world, available? And what are the other structures that don't look like the one that I know, or the ones that we all know? Like, how can we problem solve to think of some better solutions to that?
Yes.
I agree. And accessibility is really important. You know, at the core of it, I'm a tourist, so I'm a nurturer by nature, right? And over-nurturing could be an issue, but we'll leave that aside. But nurturing by nature. And, you know, I struggled with the word curator for a very long time. People kept putting it on me, and I was like, nah, you know. And then really looking at the root of curator is to care for it, to care, right? And I care for culture, and I see myself as a cultural steward. That's underneath all of it. And as a cultural steward, it's important for me to not only identify and acknowledge and recognize where culture exists in all corners of our society, not just in museums, not just in galleries, not just on festivals and stages, but where culture, I think about culture, museums don't create culture, they preserve it. They show it, they give you access to it. But culture is created in the streets.
Yes, sir.
So I stay with the people and try to identify where the culture, the next emergent culture is. I'm addicted to that, right? So finding where the culture is emerging and being a steward for that culture so it can get access in the museum, stage, or so on is really important to me. And make sure that people have the tools that when they do step in those arenas, that they're not being extracted from, that they're empowered. So they have the tools of knowing how to negotiate a contract, knowing how to talk about your work, knowing how to smell bullshit when they walk in a room, right? That as we're the OGs now, right? We're at the place where we are giving the advice to the next generation, and I take that with a tremendous responsibility.
Thank you for that. So I think now would be a great time to just ask, is there anyone here who would love to ask a question to any of the panelists here, please?
I have a question for Dr.
Yes, thank you.
That's correct, doctor.
It's kind of like a two-parter.
Okay.
One is, does the Brooklyn Museum partner with gatherings for Black Hawk creatives and artists? Like, for example, I know, the only one I know is like for Indigenous artists Afterthought for the Art Gallery of Ontario, Canada. So does the Brooklyn Museum, I guess, partner or create galleries for Black Hawk creatives?
Like specific, like, so do you mean like in the, do we have like a specific gallery dedicated to that?
Not even like a gallery, more so like a space.
So we do not have, so let me just be very clear. We don't even have a dedicated space yet for contemporary art. And that's what I curate. So, no. Let me just, but what we do is we do pretty much every exhibition that we do. I'm not gonna say exclusively every exhibition, but, and especially in our contemporary, like modern contemporary shows, let me actually backtrack. So when we're actually thinking about the shows for like the season or like the years out, there's actually a very conscious specific metric or metrics that we're looking at to make sure that we have a bit more of like a 360 kind of perspective. So in terms of looking at what is the percentage in a year of BIPOC artists, female artists, like how does that kind of all international artists, local artists, regional artists, so like there's a whole kind of system to kind of figure that out to make sure that we're not skewing any one way or the other, that there's kind of a range. It's not perfect, no, in no way is it perfect, but at least it is a way in which we're trying to be very strategic in the exhibition so that there's, at least an introduction to different artists from around the globe, of different languages, of different mediums, of different, identities, so kind of all of that. But there's, and then we have a, and again, I'm specifically talking about contemporary because that's really what I know. So we do partner with WOVO, which is a art moving company, and there's a WOVO prize. So like Brooklyn artists are submitted, and so we've done 3 years of that, and we've just got funding to do another 3 years of that. So that'll be specifically, so that's a dedicated, temporary exhibition show. And then the curators are always kind of, presenting ideas for shows, and those can take 2 to 3 years. Like it could really depend on, the time period. Is it loans? Is it coming internationally? So it really kind of depends on what that is looking like, again, within this other big schedule. And then we also have all the programs. So like so I would probably say we're better at the kind of program partnerships with BIPOC artists and the different artists than we are in terms of just having a dedicated space or any sort of, and like in terms of exhibitions, though I do think as compared to other museums, we're doing a lot better than a lot of other museums.
And my second question kind of relates to curation and artists/creatives in both standpoints. I was wondering, do you think curators and creatives/artists are one and the same? And if so, or can you be one without the other?
Okay, just so I'm making sure I'm under.
And like as a curator, do you think most curators are so and so? Like, do you think curators are artists in a lot of ways? And do you think that gets misconstrued a lot of times?
I am not an artist.
Same for me.
Neither am I.
Yeah, no, I don't think.
Definitely not.
Do I now to what you said? I think I have a taste of artistic talent, but in the sense of because I write. And you can be an artist. We just have our terminology says that whether or not you sing, you write, you dance, you visual. You're all an artist. You are a maker. I'm not a maker. I don't make anything. I do think that I try to. And honestly, if you read my stuff, you'd be like, this is the driest writing I've ever heard. Like, I don't think I sound eloquent when I write such that I'm just like, oh, the language, what she's saying. But, I read myself, I'm like, oh my God. But what I do think that I do is that, and I think, as you said, I think, again, we're a facilitator. I'm trying to make opportunities happen, but I'm trying to also present and interpret what the artist is saying and trying to make a narrative and a story, but through their work. I can't do what I do without, I don't exist without the artist, without the maker. So I would never want to say that I am that person. I do think I could probably do my job better if I had some more practice in the studio. Not because I think it gives me anything, I think it would give me a better knowledge of just like the language in terms of the making side of art. Like when artists are talking about things, I do oftentimes have to go, explain that a bit more to me because I just don't have the studio art jargon like I have the art history jargon. So I do wish that school, like art history programs and studio programs, there was a stronger need for both departments to connect more and for the courses to be more heavily invested in both sides. But what I will say is that I think if you have a vision and idea, I always, you know, when people ask me about like, how do you curate? I was like, well, just try it. I mean, there's no teaching you how to curate. It is, do you have an idea? Do you have a vision? Do you have a point of view about, I want to, and I want to present it, and just try it, and it may or may not work. Same with making, like, you have that and you do it, but I'm just doing it a different way. So I'm presenting something, but I'm not making anything. The short answer.
Sure.
Hey, thank you everyone for sharing your story and your knowledge. I'm really curious, since the industry is very personal, how do you deepen your relationships so that they last and evolve and, you know, grow with you as you evolve in your own career?
One thing that I think is kind of amazing, and it's also maybe like dating myself, like I realized I'm just older than I think of myself as, because my peers are now doing all of these amazing things who are people that I knew as like little pipsqueaks. And I think that you do that, so you just do that the way you do it in your life as well. You value the people that you're with, you listen to them, and I think try really, really hard to avoid, there's a certain kind of ambition that I find, I'm a very ambitious person, but that I find really problematic, which is like the people who hone in on like, who looks like the most important person in this room. That's a problem because, by the way, the most important person in the room today, not gonna be the same person in a week or in 5 years. So just make sure that you are thinking laterally and maintaining your friendship with people because you value, or your professional relationships, because you value what they're doing, not whether or not what they're doing is the it thing right now.
I want to add something to that, and thank you. So, if I think about every opportunity that I've had in the past, I would say decade of my life, just to kind of put some sort of framework on it. For every opportunity that's been presented, there's probably like 100 that I wish that had happened that never happened. And I'm pointing it out because you're not going to be able to make a lasting and meaningful relationship with most of the people you meet in your professional life.
Nor do you
A
want.
lot of,
That's me.
but the thing I'm pointing out is that I already know when I go to an event, and this is me today, and I'm nowhere near the person that I would love to be in a few years. And hopefully I'm further along than the person I was a few years ago. But this is me today. I know, it doesn't matter what event I go to, no matter who I talk to in the room, there's gonna be a significant number of people that I never make a meaningful connection with professionally.
Yes,
And I'm okay with that.
100%.
Because what I'm really looking for are the one, maybe two, but really the one person that I can really make a meaningful connection with, and that can kind of go somewhere. And so I point that out because I often talk to artists who are dismayed by the inability to go to an event, an opening perhaps, which is like the more common event. Sometimes you even make it to the dinner.
Yes, sir.
The dinner.
Real fancy.
And they make it to these events and they leave dismayed because they just feel like they weren't able to like make a connection with a professional like person, like, right, maybe it's a curator, it's a writer, it doesn't matter, like the person they really want to build with. And I go, it's okay. Like most of the people you meet, it's not gonna go anywhere. And it's similar to like dating, but I'm not gonna like I'm not going down that road because it's a little bit different. But the point of it is that that just comes with the package. It's like part of the whole like business of being in the art world. That almost 99% of the people you meet, you're never gonna have any sort of like lasting business relationship with. And it's okay.
It really is.
Right? So how do you remedy that? My advice is always meet more people, right? And invest less in the emotional, like,
Attachments, yes.
sort of like vulnerability you may have shown to someone, like talking to them about your work. And this is me too, like I'm not an artist, but I still talk to people about my work. And sometimes they don't care, and that's okay with me too, right? And I just approach it from the standpoint of I'm always, man, I'm just gonna like leave it with this. So someone recently asked me like, wow, you're so busy, like you're working on all these projects, like what is the focal point? And for me, it's like I always go where the love is. Like I always. So it's like if I meet someone and I'm like, oh, there's some love here. Like we can make something happen. We can collaborate. I'm all there. And if there's no love there, that's fine too, right? Because there's plenty of love. And I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about love for like what you're doing, what you're focused on, what you're interested in. There's so many artists, some of them in this room, that I absolutely love what they're doing. And I've known them for years and years. And that love never wanes. It doesn't matter what the market says, what a collector says, what a curator says. It's just like something that I've connected with, and I keep like driving and driving and driving. And almost in a way, when there's no love in a conversation, it's almost like a relief sometimes, because it's like, you know, like, how much love can you have, right, in your life? It's like, so that's how I focus on things, and I hope that's meaningful.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that. I think you have to be centered in who you are and where you are in your journey. I think early on as an artist, think about like even being, you know, a student of a new major, like you trying to tell everybody about the subject matter. So I think when you're an artist and you're creating work, the first impulse is you want to let everyone know that you're an artist. That's a phase, and that's okay. You get to a point where you stop seeking validation. Yeah. You're just like centered in your power. Knowing what your lens is and being able to articulate what your artistic lens is, like, and you start to attract yourself, right? So you start to attract the people that are for your path, and you don't worry about the people that are not. I'm a humanitarian, so I make sure that I'm listening to what the person is talking about, and knowing that I have no idea what impact I'm going to have on that person in that conversation. So I think less about myself, because I know when I have back to that connection, boom, oh, we're connected, boom, all right, we're going to make it happen. But even if it's someone just having a quick conversation with me, I just like, am I answering your question? Cool, that's it. For me, it's just answering your question so I can move on. For me, it may be like not meaningful, but I know that I've had experiences where a person came back to me years later and was like, you said this thing and it changed my life. Ever since that happened, I'm like, I have no idea where this goes in someone's consciousness. So I just give my best and keep it moving.
We probably have time for one more question before we wrap up, but I want to, I imagine that most of the people who are in here are artists, and I just want to say something to you as artists. Like, I mean, this whole thing revolves around you. This whole thing. Yeah. It's so bizarre to me that gets lost in all these conversations. I mean, there are no self-proclaimed artists up here. I mean, I know I'm not, and the three of you said you weren't, and Rasu, you're the last one. Are you an artist?
I've been called an artist, but I don't claim it.
Okay, so you're not claiming it.
I don't agree.
But my point is that the artists really do have all the power in this whole entire ecosystem. And it is a travesty that so much about the way the art world functions sort of like turned it upside down, where the artists are the ones that are sort of like trying to figure shit out and trying to like figure out like what to do, etc. When there wouldn't even be any conversation to be had if it wasn't for the people that were actually like distilling all of this humanity and all of this history into, in some cases, objects, and in some cases, ideas. And remember that, right? And like step into that, and it's not about like putting your ego first, but it's also like realizing that you are the central piece of all of this. Yes. And so this like conversation with the critics, it's wonderful, but we're really like just talking about artists. That's like, we're just talking about you, and without that, we wouldn't have anything to say, right?
So true.
It's true, right? So we have time for like one.
They all I'll go
Okay.
on.
Okay, the three of you went up at the same time, so I'm gonna just acknowledge that. But after we answer these three questions, we're gonna all like call it a night and, give each other a big hug before we get out of here. So 1, 2, 3.
Be brief.
That was a question, but I'm just going to ask one that's for you, Rasu. I find it very interesting when someone comes from a different field and not only gets to participate, but actually gets to be successful and make an impact on a new field. Did you find, coming into the art world, that you could see as an outsider some opportunities that were hidden in plain sight to the people who were brought out in the art world, but that were very obvious to you? And in the same question, do you still foster in yourself some outsider view while at the same time trying to be like assimilated also in the art world?
That was a question because you just explained my whole career. Right. I mean, at the heart, I'm very curious, and I keep that curiosity going. Like even with running an institution, you will bump into me at a festival, in the street, at a party. I'm just really curious about culture, right? So that's one. Coming into leaving technology and making that shift into art was really, I got told by a luminary, you can never be a curator if you didn't go to these schools. You don't have a show in these galleries. Like literally laid it out and was like, you'll never be a curator. You cannot tell me that. That's like daring me, right?
Gauntlet drop.
Right? So that's what it was. It was like, well, I'm gonna create, anyone that grew up in New York City, this like the club, this is the front door. I went through the side door of the club. I just found my lane. I found my very specific value proposition. And what it was like, I have something that most curators don't. I'm connected to the community like in a very authentic way. So I had so many curators come to me and ask me questions, and I was like, I can just do it myself. So my lens was being connected to culture in an authentic way, that no matter how much research you did, you didn't have the context, you didn't really have the story, right? So I would leverage that in all my situations, that's one. The way I keep it alive is I keep people around me who are just really smarter than me and are gonna feed that curiosity perpetually. So my staff at Brooklyn Arts Council, they're geniuses. And it's really important for me that I'm not the smartest person in the room, that I always keep people who are really intelligent, really curious, and we're going from one paradigm to the next, that they're on that trajectory for the next paradigm. They're not stuck in the past.
We have one over here and then one back there.
Hello. Thank you for such great insights. And I have a question. I guess, what advice would you give to artists to never stop growth in their artistic practice and to never truly play their role and be authentic to themselves, to stay authentic to themselves despite all the hassles of the art world that you just spoke about?
May I?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
I think that it's incredibly difficult to exist as an artist in modern society because like life is really expensive.
Yes.
And we say that kind of anecdotally, but it's like really, really fucking expensive.
Yes.
And so as a result, I think many of the artists that I know, and not to generalize, that's why I say the artists that I know, find themselves in this position where they're questioning the choices they're making because being an artist doesn't necessarily allow them to function. Mm-hmm. I'm not even talking about success. I'm talking about like functioning, right? The basic stuff you need to do, especially in a city like New York. And part of that, I believe, is connected to this mythology or folklore we have about what the life of an artist is. And I will be the first to tell you, I'm not an expert on that. But when my understanding of it, my limited understanding of it, is that it's rooted in this idea that the lone genius makes something, whatever it is, and the rest of the world fawns over it, and they pay them a lot of money for it. and then they live a great life. And the reality is that that hardly ever happens. And also, even the famous artists that we could just rattle off off of the top of our heads, that didn't happen for them either. Especially when you think about art history. So forget about like post-war artists, like who sort of lived fairly recently. But generally speaking, that's never really been the case unless you had a patron who was bankrolling your production and acquiring the work that you make. And I think it's like a tragedy almost in a way that mythology continues to sort of perpetuate itself, all the while, at the same time, in the past 20 years, you've had this sort of like other mythology in Silicon Valley where you have all these tech bros who basically have a half-baked idea for a half-baked solution to a half-baked problem, who can get hundreds of millions of dollars in some case, to then fail and say, well, we tried, and are not held accountable for that. And then you have artists who are told, if you are not successful, you made the wrong career choice. And it's...
Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's something I think about often, right? And so, if I were an artist, and I'm not, I think my approach would be understanding that no one really knows what I'm going through, and because they don't know that, they can't really care. Like they could think they care, but they don't know, so they can't really like care. So what I would do is I would think about like, what can I do to sustain myself professionally? What are the other things I can do other than making my work? Because we're live now, right? It's utter bullshit that an artist is not a real artist if they have some other stream of income, or if they have a job. This is bullshit. It's like, it's so ridiculous, right? And anyone who tells you that, well, they should buy everything you make. Right? Because like, what's the converse? Like, anyway. So the reality is that if you are an artist, have another stream of income.
Yes.
I was about to say that. Get a job.
Yes. Yeah.
That's just
multiple
like,
streams of income.
just straight up.
Get a
But
fucking
all
job.
that other stuff is nonsense. Have another stream of income so that when you step into your studio, you can make what you want to make.
Yeah.
Right? And then you can then build your career from that point. Don't put yourself in a position where the next thing you make is going to pay all of your bills.
Yeah.
That's what I think about that. Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly say also, I think that there's another false narrative that, to be kind of an authentic artist, you've got this grand idea, but 9 times out of 10, someone's already done that. Like, art is not made in a vacuum. There's a reason, like with, art history, and like there's millennia of art practice, and it keeps, and it's adaptation and evolution just in the creative mindset. So, again, I think, again, to what Dexter said, just make the work you want to make as long as you also have the means to live, and ideally live well. I think we forget about that too. It's like, New York is like, oh, I gotta survive, I gotta hustle. Like, yes, you do. I mean, we've all done that too, but at a certain point, I don't wanna hustle. I wanna go to the spa every month. So, and I will make sure I have that spa money in my account to cover that. So it's like, so I just think, all of us, I have multiple streams of income, like, and I have a full-time job, but I also know that I want to live well. I've worked hard enough to do that.
And it's New York City.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have one in the back and then one and done.
What's one thing you wish every emerging artist
Wait, every emerging artist would do what?
What's one thing you wish every emerging artist knew?
Multiple streams of income.
Yes.
Get
a job. No. You go.
No, I mean, I think that one was really good.
Yeah.
I think that, like, everybody knows this at an abstract level, but trends and fads are trendy.
Yes.
And you got to do the thing that you actually care about and make the work that you care about. And it's a really long game. And maybe it's not popular till you're 90, and that sucks. But at least you get that when you're 90. And you made the thing that you feel good about. Right. If you get to 90. Fair point. I work with a lot of really old artists.
Make
True
good
fact.
work. That's one
But
thing.
make the work
Good
that you
fucking
wanna
work.
make.
That's what you need to do, and
Yeah.
focus on the work. Kind of like cancel all the noise around you. Like I said previously, like do not guide yourself through the optics of what you see your peers or some people that you admire doing on the gram. Just do what you need to do, but do it like good.
Yeah, I have a very pragmatic answer to that, and it's aligned with what I do, right? I think all artists, how many students are in this room? Raise your hand. How many art students are in this room? Okay, great. Keep your hands up. Art students, okay, cool. How many of you art students are taking business classes? That is the fucking problem.
Yep.
Because when it comes, right,
Yeah.
right. But no, this is the thing. Art school is going to teach you form and technique.
Yes.
It's not going to teach you how to run a business.
Or
Your
doing
art
taxes.
or do your taxes. Your art studio is your business. And what happens is corporatocracy and capitalism puts corporations or jobs against artists.
Yep.
And if you look at the artists who are really successful, they run a business called their artwork.
Yes.
And that's the thing that is broken, that our consciousness is kind of, we've been educated out of looking at ourselves as a potential business model. Yeah. You're not gonna go to a bank and get bankrolled for your studio. Guess how you can bankroll it? How many of you are artists who also are bartenders? You know, you save your money, put it to the side for your artwork, but you also learn how to balance a budget. You also know how to build a budget. You also know how to write a grant. You also know, all the artists that are successful either do that or they pay someone to do that for them.
Yeah.
That is a business.
Huge.
And they also become LLC. So take that into your notes, because that's the way you want to get paid from now on. Become a corporation yourself, you know, because you're a walking brand.
Can I
It's
pick?
like accounting.
Wow.
Yeah, I wish I had. I want to piggyback on that and also say, like, read your contracts.
Yes.
Yes.
Museums give out contracts. Galleries give out contracts.
Yes.
Contracts are agreements between two parties. You can counter. But
Yes.
you got to read it first, and you got to think about what you want from it.
And if you can't take a business class, I mean, we know that there are, especially with the pandemic, there are so many finance books out there. There are so many financial podcasts and finfluencers. I mean, take them with a grain of salt, too. Like, not every as we know, not all knowledge is good knowledge. It's just knowledge and information. But again, to what Rasu said, yeah, I mean, this is about you live well, but and also know how to do it so that you can live the life that you want, and that does mean that you have to actually think like a business owner. You can't just think like an art, you do have to. It is the business of art. This world is a business, and you are one individual in it. So how can you make sure that you are in the best position for yourself to get what you want and get what you need? And that may not always be living in New York.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
We are.
I'm saying
we're about
that
to go
too.
down like a whole another path right now, but unfortunately, we are going to have to call the game for time. I want to thank New York Academy of Art for creating a space for this kind of conversation. I want to thank our panelists here for their generosity and kindness to be here today and to talk to us. So thank you all. And
Thank you for inviting us, Dexter.
Thank you.
and most importantly, I want to thank everyone who was here today, like
Yeah.
each and every one of you for
Yes,
like
thanks
being
for
here. Like I'm looking you in your eyes. Like I'm looking at you. Like thank you. I see you there, Jan. You know, and just like it's really meaningful for us to be in the same room together. I see you, Margaret. I see you, Peter. You know, to take the time to kind of like get to know each other, and you know, I'm easily accessible. So thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, like, yes, I keep telling people. I'm already on that.